What's up, guys? Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com, back with another SketchUp extension tutorial for you. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how to use FredoScale to quickly and easily resize our windows and our casework to fit inside of our models. Before we get started, I want to thank my newest supporters on Patreon. So big thank you to Robert Hobbs, Haran Zaguri, Greg Chromians, Cyril, and Tony Reynoso. Patreon, as most of you know, is the website where you can support creators that you like on YouTube. One of the perks of supporting the show on Patreon is you get to vote on the extension that I cover every week. So if that's something you're interested in, you want to support the show, maybe vote on the extension that I cover every week, make sure you check out that link in the notes down below. So this week my patrons voted, and they asked for another FredoScale tutorial. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so one of the things we talked about a few weeks ago on the show was how to use box stretching in FredoScale in order to resize objects without actually deforming them or anything like that. So like for example, if I took this tall cabinet, and you can see how it's a little bit too long to fit along this wall. Well, if I was to take this cabinet and select it and activate the scale tool, you can see how I can scale it if I want to, but you get deformation in the trim pieces in here. So now the trim pieces aren't the same size anymore. Everything looks a little bit weird. And so what we're going to do instead is we're going to use FredoScale's box stretching tool. And what box stretching does is it allows you to stretch an object without deforming it. So it lets you stretch an object based on a point. So like for example, let's say we had this tall cabinet and I wanted to stretch this so that it fits along the wall, but I didn't want it to deform the front trim pieces or anything like that. Well, what I could do is I could select it, then activate the box stretching tool, and then when I mouse over this, you can see how when I mouse over the different boxes like this, I get different planes on here. Well, that's indicating to you from which point this is going to stretch. So what that means is I can click and drag this around in order to adjust where this stretches from. And in this case, I'm going to leave this centered on the object. But what I can do now is I can click and drag this, and I can inference up along this wall so that this cabinet right here scales in based on this central point rather than the edges. So you can see how now these trim pieces stay the same size. So if I look at this, this is going to be 2 1/4 inches, and this should also be 2 1/4 inches. So you can do that without distorting your object. So that's really powerful, and part of the reason I wanted to make this video, even though I've already talked about this a couple weeks ago, is because I already forgot it was an option and I was resizing cabinets manually, which was really painful, and this is as much a reminder to me as it is to you guys. But in this case though, that's a little bit weird. I don't like how wide we had to make this, and so what we're going to do instead is we're going to move this cabinet over so that it lines up with the edge of this wall. And then I'm going to use box stretching in order to adjust the size of this cabinet instead. And so this could get even trickier if you tried to do this manually, because you'd have to go in and start selecting geometry and changing doors and all this other stuff, and that's not really what we want. And so what I want to do instead is I want to use box stretching again, but this time I want to use the about center function. And so the way the about center function is going to work is when I click on this, when I mouse over this edge, if I right click, I get a couple different options. And in this case, I get an option for from center. Well, when I select the option for from center, what that means is this is going to scale this about the center instead of about the edges. And obviously this isn't doing what we want it to do, even if I click and drag this over. And so what we want though is, because this is about center, if I click and drag this, this is actually going to give me 2 different planes from which I can scale this. Well, now I can single click and I can rescale this based on that. And so the only thing about that though is being precise with that can be a little bit tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw an edge between the 2 points that I want to inference, between the 2 points that I want to place this along. So in this case, what I want is I want this object to be centered along this edge when I rescale it. So I want it to fill that space. Well, what I can do now is I can take this and I can line this up with the center point of that line like this. So now we're centered. And now if we run box stretching in about center mode, or from center, if we click and drag this so that it's in the middle of these panels a little bit, then I click and drag this, you can see how I can actually use this to inference to different points in here in order to make my size what I want it to be. And even then, it's still not giving me quite what I want, so I'm going to have to do just a little bit of kind of guessing on this. So I'm just going to rotate up, and I'm going to go ahead and move this across like this. And then I'll just move this over so these edges line up. So you may have a little bit of a gap right here. But overall, you can see how I was able to resize that so that it fits in this gap really quickly. Then once you're done with that, you can take that guideline that you created and you can delete that out of here. But you can see how that allowed me to be able to resize this cabinet without having to go in and do a bunch of geometry rework. And so we can do the same thing with this window. So you can see how this window right now has two problems. It's too tall and it's not wide enough. And so if we didn't want to go download a new window, we could click on box stretching, and then to start off I would want to find the vertical plane in this case, and about center, or from having this in the center and having this scale from opposite points is going to work just fine. You can see how I'm able to use this to rescale this to fit along this point really easily. And then we don't necessarily want to do this from the opposite side again, because you can see how that gives us that distortion. So we're going to do the same thing we did before, where we're just going to activate box stretching, mouse over this, select from center by right clicking and clicking on from center, and then clicking and dragging this so that it's somewhere along this point. But if you remember, again, since we're doing this about center, we need to have this window centered in this opening. And then when we do this, and I may have to reset my plane, now I can just single click and move my mouse over this edge and then click again, and you can see how this window gets resized so that it fits in this opening. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you thought. Was this helpful to you? Is this a tool you've used before? I just love having that SketchUp conversation with you guys. If you like this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new SketchUp content every week. If you like what I'm doing on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Every little bit helps, even if it's only $1 a month. So make sure you check out that link in the notes down below. But in any case, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.